Is everything that you imagine, you think about and imagine does have an effect on the body. So the key with using the mind-body connection to kind of heal is understanding what happens when you think in particular ways, when you form particular images or set particular intentions or beliefs.
Hello and welcome to the Mind Body Spirit Festival podcast. I am your host, Rach Cox, and I am thrilled to be interviewing some of the world's best known experts in spirituality and well-being. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Well, I'm very lucky to be here with David Hamilton, so thank you so much for coming on and creating space in your hectic work schedule. You're very busy.
It's my absolute pleasure, Rach. I'm really pleased to be here.
Great. Well, thank you again. Would you be able to give us a very quick, sort of simple explanation as to how our minds might actually be able to heal our bodies?
Hey, well, the bottom line, what it really comes down to is everything that you imagine, you think about and imagine does have an effect on the body. So the key with using the mind-body connection to kind of heal is understanding what happens when you think in particular ways, when you form particular images or set particular intentions or believe certain things, and then just doing it on purpose. And the key with visualization is just if you repeat something, like you would say an affirmation, the old favourite, every day and every way I'm getting better and better. So with the mind-body connection for healing, if you visualize something, but do it repetitively, just like you would repeat an affirmation, you repeat the visualization, then as we keep repeating it, it begins to have an actual physical effect in the brain that begins to have a physical effect inside the body. But that's the very basis of how it works.
Okay, great. So it's a practice as well. It's not just like having one thought and, why haven't I got £1 million?
I know. How good would that be if it could?
What I want, David, is a short, sharp.
I know. But, I've often wondered about that, Rachel. And I think, if it was that easy to just think, I want £1 million, then it lands in our hands, that would mean that every thought that we have would be the same. And I think most of us don't tend to have a positive mind all the time. So we'd probably manifest a pile of shit in our lives.
Absolutely. I definitely would. I suffer with depression quite a lot of the time. And so, yeah. It does. It does manifest a pile of shit. Indeed.
I've had that experience. I suffered from depression several years ago. It was really, really tough. And so in certain times in our lives, if the thoughts manifested that fast, then we would manifest a torturous stuff in our life, and then we'd give that all our focus, and it'd be very difficult to extract ourselves. So I think just like in life, there's a kind of handy lag time between visualizing something and then eventually happening. And that, I think that allows you to change your mind, and that allows you to recognize when you're not really giving it the right focus and stuff like that. It's a kind of handy little, maybe nature's built us in that way, that we've got that handy little lag time where we...
A wee bit of a buffer.
Yeah, a wee bit of a buffer, yeah. We can repetitively do it and think, am I actually intending the right thing?
Yeah.
Handy.
Yeah, I'm very glad about the buffer, let me tell you.
Yeah, me too.
What are some common misconceptions that some people may have about the mind-body connection?
Well, I would say the first misconception that a lot of people have and still have is that the mind is impotent, in the sense that all we use it for is just to think or to interpret what's happening in the world. But the actual impact of our thoughts and stuff are impotent. They're meaningless. Doesn't have any effect at all. That's a common misperception, because when you think of something that makes you happy, then you produce certain chemicals in your brain. If you think of someone you don't get on with, you create different chemicals in your brain, and these both have an effect on the body. The other misconception is basically what we just talked about a minute ago, is that some people have this misconception that if the mind can heal the body or impact the body, then I just have to imagine £1 million, or imagine this illness is just gone in a second and it should just absolutely disappear in a second. And again, I don't think it works as easy as that, because if that was the case, then we'd probably manifest all the wrong things, because we're not always in a positive, happy state all the time. So I think the truth lies somewhere between those two extremes, sort of in the middle, and it kind of varies depending on where we are in our life and what's been happening, how we feel, that sort of thing. But it's somewhere in the middle between those two extremes is the actual truth of the mind-body connection.
You've just said how you feel. So some practices to do with power of the mind also talk about feelings as well. What's your thoughts about what are your thoughts about feelings?
Yeah, my thoughts about feel. I think it's easier to use, to harness the mind-body connection, to use tools and techniques that we're aware of. It's easier when you're feeling in a positive state. It's more tricky when you're not feeling good, because then sometimes you lack hope, don't you? And you feel like,
Yeah.
what's the point? Or can I really be bothered? Do I feel tired and stuff? And I've been there. We've all sort of been there in those kind of states. So it's better if we can fit it. Not better, it's easier. And I think if most people can probably acknowledge that from their own personal experience. Tools and techniques that we know can be helpful are easier for us to use if we're feeling better. So there's a skill first to try to put ourselves into a better feeling state, or even the better feeling state could be part of the technique. For example, I often start techniques with a little bit of a practice, like a mindfulness or a kindfulness, as I call it, just to
I
put
like
us
that.
into a slightly better state.
Nice. Yeah. And I think there's a chance when you talk about people not being in a great state, sometimes it can lean into a little bit of bypassing. It's like, well, I'm going to try and think my way out of my horrible situation. I don't think that's what we're sort of talking about here, is it? It's not like you're just trying to overlay a terrible situation or a terrible
No.
feeling. It's something completely different, because
Yeah,
there is a lot of confusion and there's a lot of bypassing that happens.
yeah. It's certainly not at all. I mean, it's being honest with where I'm at, for
Right.
example, and
Great.
saying, even though this is where I'm at, this is where I feel myself to be right now, even though I'm still going to give this a try.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But I'm not going to pretend it doesn't exist. I'm not going to, just walk around and say, okay, I am all is absolutely fine in my life, when I know, for example, it's not, and I'm, perhaps feel like shit today, sort of
Yeah.
thing. But despite that, I'm going to give this a try, kind of thing. And despite that, I understand that there are ways that I can optimize how I think, ways I can point my mind in a certain direction that can have a beneficial effect.
Great. Yeah, it's all training, isn't it? Being aware of oneself.
Yeah, oh God.
Being a grown up, David, darling. Being
I
a
know,
grown
don't
up.
tell me to grow up. I don't want to grow up.
Look at me. I'm clearly not a grown up. I look like a unicorn on crack. Lots of people.
I love your use of colour. It looks great
Thank
on
you.
you. Yeah.
It's actually me tricking myself into feeling good all the time. It does work.
It works. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's. I don't want to say trick. I'll say technique. It's a technique.
It's a technique. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a better word, isn't it?
I'll go with technique.
Good. Kindfulness and technique. There are two buzzwords so far.
Absolutely. Yep.
So when people are feeling really stressed or frazzled or reaching burnout, and that obviously impacts on your mind and your body, what kind of strategies would you recommend for managing it, apart from wearing rainbow?
Yeah. Well. Other than wearing rainbow, which I'm going to start doing a little bit more, because it clearly works. One of my go-tos actually is kindfulness. And kindfulness is like a friendly spin on mindfulness. So mindfulness says, notice. Kindfulness says, and also care. Really. So kindfulness is like mindfulness. I just call it kindfulness for a number of different reasons, but it's just like mindfulness, except some of the focus, instead of just being on the breath, which mindfulness most of the time tends to be, some of that focus is diverted towards thinking kindly of people, or recalling experiences of kindness, or even wishing people good things in their life, people that you know, or even thinking kindly of yourself can be a form of kindfulness as
Yeah,
well.
that's pretty important, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's where most people fall short.
Yeah, but the absolute key in all of this, though, is that kindness is neurologically and physiologically the opposite of stress. And I often ask audiences, what do you think is the opposite of stress? And everyone says, well, it's peace, or it's calm, it's tranquility. Absolutely, I would have given the same answer myself. But peace, calm, tranquility, they're not the opposite of stress. They're the absence of stress.
Ah.
Neurologically, physiologically, the opposite of stress is kindness. And I know people might think, okay, stress is a feeling, kindness is a thing, so how can it be opposite? Well, let me put it another way. The opposite of the experience of stress, what that experience is like for you, is the experience of kindness, and what kindness is like for you. And now we have two experiences, and both experiences produce a little type of a family of hormones in the body. One's called stress hormones, the other I call kindness hormones. But if you track them, which I've actually done, if you track them, then they literally go in opposite directions. So just about everything that we know of today that stress does, or stress hormones do, then kindness or kindness hormones do pretty much the opposite.
Right.
Really, it's like a seesaw. When one goes up, the other one comes down.
It's like
Uh,
an antidote. That's lovely.
it really, kindness really is an antidote to stress, and that's why often it's my go-to. Like I'll start with a couple of minutes of just taking some relaxing breathing, relaxing breaths, because obviously relaxing breaths, we kick in, we begin to let the parasympathetic, the rest portion of the nervous system dominate a little bit, and that can take anything from a minute or so to 5 or 10 minutes. But once I'm feeling a little bit more calm with that, then I start the kindfulness. I'll think of, I sometimes just think of people in my life and think of things that they want. And it's almost like a wee prayer. I say, may you have a great day today. May something really magical happen in your life today. I might even think of some of the reasons why I think that person's a good parent, for example, or why I think they're a nice person, or think of things that are, nice about them as a person. Any way of thinking kindly of a person is what I call is a kindfulness practice.
That sounds more accessible than perhaps a gratitude practice when you're feeling really terrible and
Yeah.
then you try to be grateful. That is such a struggle. Whereas that sounds, what you've just described,
Yeah.
much more tangible.
Yeah, and more accessible, because
Yeah.
it's easier to think kindly of someone, to recall something kind that someone said to you, a way that a friend supported you, for example, or even something that you witnessed, something you saw in a social media video, like a person rescuing an animal or something.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. It's easier to access those kind of thoughts than it is, especially if you're feeling low. It's harder to access gratitude if you're feeling low, but it's much easier to remember someone saying, giving you a supportive squeeze in the shoulder kind of thing,
Yeah.
or someone paying for your coffee. It's much easier to access those. And the beauty of that is neurologically and physiologically, that generates the opposite conditions to stress in the body. So the nervous system begins to calm, even blood pressure begins to drop as a consequence of experiences of kindness.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't need anyone to be kind to me. My blood pressure is already that of a corpse. So I clearly need more stress. I'm very much joking, David. I have enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Where does manifestation happen in the mind as well as the body? So the mind-body connection with manifestation. I think we've kind of touched on it a wee bit.
Yeah, it's very similar actually, because if you think of the placebo effect, for example, what drives for listeners who are not overly familiar with the placebo effect, it's when you take what you think is a real medicine, but it's been like swapped for a sugar pill, so it's a placebo, but it still works, and the reason it still works is because when you take that little, let's say it's a wee white tablet, you have an expectation, and the expectation is, let's suppose it's for a headache, my headache will go away in about 15, 20 minutes, depending how long these medicines take to work. So what happens though when it's a placebo is your expectation actually causes your brain to produce its own painkillers. And it's your brain's own painkillers that then cause an actual physical drop in pain. Years ago, we used to think the placebo effect was just a figment of the imagination. It's not real. It's not, people are not really feeling better. They just think they're feeling better, all that kind of stuff. But now we know physically that when you take something and you're expecting something to happen, that expectation itself, like a belief, causes your brain to do what it needs to do to meet that expectation, so produce these natural painkillers. So in a sense, what's driving the manifestation of the reduction in pain is an expectation. And that's a bit like in our lives, when we set an intention in our lives and then we try to manifest something. It's partly the intention, but it's actually more so the expectation. Now that I've set that intention, I'm expecting something to happen, because if you set an intention and you expect it not to work, then we usually get what you expect, not what you intend.
Yeah.
And so what the placebo effect shows us in the mind-body connection, they show us very clearly what is the deciding factor. It's more expectation than intention. The expectation is the energy force. It's the motive power that drives the placebo effect. That's what causes your brain to do what it needs to do. And I think in life, you might set an intention, but it's what you expect, therefore, that actually powers it up, that pumps it up.
What you really believe in
What you
yourself.
really believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mate was a surgeon, and he said they used to do placebo knee operations where they'd put the little scars on the knees, and basically people would go under and wake up, and it would literally their knees would be okay. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's a scientific study on that, actually. A couple of published studies. They call it sham surgery. I don't like the term sham surgery, but
no, me neither.
It's just the term they use. But for things like arthritis, it's highly successful. When people just make the incision, make it look visible, like something's been done and stuff. And literally, for a lot of patients, it does actually produce more or less the same effect as the actual surgery.
It's literally mind-boggling and impressive.
Yeah, I mean, not for ethical reasons, you could never do that for more serious things, but for things like arthritis, that certainly has been done a number of times.
You read my mind, because I was thinking as I said that, I was like, I wonder if they must have declared it before and carved a caveat that some of you will obviously have placebo, some of you won't. And
Yeah. They have to. For an ethical committee would never allow you to do that, so people need to know what they're getting into.
Yeah. And even with that that background knowledge, I guess if you wake up and you see the scars, that's it. You're like, well, I'm done.
But there was a sort of a more blind placebo study that wasn't necessarily placebo at the time, but we only came to realise that the surgery does nothing. Several years ago, there was a technique called mammary artery ligation surgery. It's a way just to divert an artery. And years later, it was found that the technique itself does absolutely nothing, but it benefited hundreds of thousands of people.
Wow.
Hundreds of thousands of people, especially in the United States, who got that operation. It was later found to actually have no physiological effect at all, the actual surgery. And so what was driving that change in people's blood pressure and change in other outcomes, even some of the blood work, what was changing that was the belief that I've had this amazing surgery. It's called mammary artery ligation surgery.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. Yeah. And on such a massive scale.
Yeah, it's no longer done now because scientists know that it doesn't have it doesn't have what the intended physical effect. It doesn't do anything at all in terms of what would produce that lowering blood pressure, for angina and stuff. It wouldn't do anything at all. But what was actually causing the effect is people's expectation. I've had that surgery. I'm expecting to be better now, and you were.
Oh my goodness, that is really impressive.
Yeah.
Good old minds. Good old minds.
Good old minds.
And then they find out that it doesn't work. Their style. Then we can't just have the mind doing all the good work, can we?
I know.
No, can't have that, mate.
Yeah.
I've got a little question here from Roz, and she says, if our partner comes home after having a stressful day, how would that stress impact on our mind and physical body? And you're hosting a workshop with Mind Body Spirit Festival in May. In the workshop, will you show us how we can make sure that other people's crap doesn't affect us, basically?
Yes. So basically, I think we've all had that experience.
Oh God,
yeah. That people sometimes, if they're stressed, it makes you stressed. Or people in a bad mood, it impacts us. And researchers have actually figured out there's a wee circuit of the brain, and it's called the mirror neuron system, MNS. Wow. And what it does is it mirrors people's emotional expression, not so much what's being said, but how it's being said. And it's an artifact of hundreds of years of evolution. Hundreds of thousands, millions of years of evolution, long before language became, languages, I don't know, the language about 10, 15,000 years, complex language, 10, 15,000 years old. So for millions of years, our ancient ancestors communicated through body language and gesture. So the brain had to learn. We had to learn to be able to understand people's intentions and what their needs were by just reading their facial expressions. And so what evolved in the human brain was something called the mirror neuron system. Babies show it really well. Babies respond to your smile and all that because babies don't have language, but they have a mirror neuron system. And it's actually how infants learn. They learn through imitation by watching you doing something. Smile, for example, or move your hands. They learn through imitation. And it's the mirror neuron system that gives us it. But in adults, it has a slight downside. It has an upside. It's really handy if you're hanging out with people who are happy. Because your mirror neuron system means that you're mirroring the expression of happiness. And without realizing it, there's certain people you just feel good around. Because your mirror neuron system is mirroring their state and you're catching it. It's called emotional contagion. The downside is emotional contagion means we also catch people's negative states. So if you're spending more time with people who are in negative moods, stressed moods, angry moods, bad moods, then we also soak that up. So the mirror neuron system mirrors it. It's called the mirror neuron system because you take it on yourself. And we start to feel the same way. It also starts to bring about stress effects in our own bodies. There's a really simple technique. In fact, it works. That emotional contagion is even more prevalent for people who are high in empathy. The more in empathy you are, research shows that the more likely you are to catch emotion, positive and negative. So if you are kind of high in empathy or even moderately in empathy, there's a little trick. I figured it out years ago because I scored really high on an empathy scale. I wondered why, I always seem to feel vulnerable in situations around people who are angry or stressed and all that kind of stuff. And what basically the technique involves just taking control of your own physiology. Because when you're catching someone's emotion, I'll share it more fully in the workshop. But when you're catching people's emotions, your body is beginning to move unconsciously in the same way as theirs. And you begin to mirror their facial expressions and body movements. So by recognizing that's happening, the technique is about taking control of your own posture. And the moment you assert control of your own posture and body language, it's like you're deflecting. It's like boom. It's like you deflect that incoming negative emotion and it was bouncing, it just deflects away.
Ah, lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, is it possible, this is just out of my own head now, is it possible to then change a situation by then perhaps them mirroring what you've changed?
Absolutely. Yeah. What it actually comes down to is whose emotional expression is strongest. If your expression of peace, for example, is stronger than someone's expression of anger, then peace will win.
Wow.
So sometimes in life it comes down to your presence, your ability to generate and maintain a state. And you can do that by holding your body posture. That really helps. Holding your posture in the way you want it to do. If your expression of joy is more powerful than someone's expression of sadness, then that person will feel better among you when in your company rather than the other way around.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, that's cool. More reason to go around being a joyful lunatic, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, bring a little bit of lightness and joy to people. Start wearing lots of colours and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Smiling.
It does work. It really does work.
Yeah.
Infectious. What is hindering a good mind-body connection these days? For example, there's obviously news and phones and things like that. So
I think you nailed it there. It's distraction. Often I've noticed, and I noticed myself going through these little kind of phases, is ability to using the mind-body connection is in part dependent upon your ability to concentrate, to focus on what it is you want, to focus on something. And I think the more we distract ourselves with our phones, with news, just checking every 5 or 10 minutes or every minute you're checking something, then what happens in the brain is we start to lose some of the focusing power, if you will. It's like some of the wee connections, the power, the cables, if you like, in the brain begin to thin because we're not using them as much. And so we actually lose our ability to concentrate and focus. So the more you distract yourself, the more difficult it becomes to focus. One thing I sometimes do, especially when I'm book writing, so I've literally just finished writing a book, And what I sometimes do when I'm writing, because I was getting into a habit, every time I got to a bit that was mentally taxing, I'd pick up my phone and scroll, the doom scrolling. Now what I do is I actually throw my phone over onto a sofa at the other side of my office. It's got pillows in it, so I make sure it doesn't land on the floor. But I just kind of throw it over, and it's a physical act, me saying, I am taking control of my focus. I'm not going to scroll, and I literally throw it over the other side, let it land on, the cushions, and then I get down to work. And it just, you train yourself to have a bit more focus and concentration.
Yeah, amazing. So throw your phones around, everyone.
Yeah.
That's what I'm picking up.
Just somewhere soft.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. So in your workshop, will you be going full woo-woo? And I like to call that wafty. I call lots of spiritual people quite wafty, most of which are my friends and family. Or will you be staying strictly scientific?
Yeah, I go a kind of bit of both.
Cool.
Really, and when it's almost it's changing our definition of what woo is. When I wrote a book called Why Woo Woo Works, and really what I was pointing out in the early stages of the book is a lot of stuff that we used to call woo woo, like the mind body connection. We used to dismiss 20 years ago. People would openly laugh at the idea that you could use visualization to have an impact on the body, for example, to help yourself to heal. People would laugh at that. Whereas now we know, about the mind-body connection. It's mainstream science.
Yeah.
And often things that people think are woo-woo are actually not as woo-woo as you think, because there is a lot of supporting evidence to say, well, it really does work. Like Reiki, for example, people still think of Reiki as really, really woo-woo and all that, but there's a ton of evidence to say that Reiki helps with pain control, it helps with mental health. There's a whole host. There's even randomized controlled trials and randomized statistical analysis of randomized controlled trials. So that, these things are not as woo-woo as you think.
No.
So I definitely go into the woo-woo. And then I also touch, in the workshop, I'll be touching on even the further into the woo-woo, like the mind, consciousness. Can we pray for people at a distance? Can we, intend things for other people in a positive and supportive way? Can that have an effect? And that sounds to many people way out there woo-woo. But everything I talk about has support and science behind it. So I also share the evidence that shows that there is a heck of a lot more research on this kind of stuff than you would ordinarily think. So sometimes when we dismiss something as woo-woo, it sounds like we're stating a fact that it's a lot of rubbish. But in actual fact, what we're stating sometimes is their own ignorance about the available research. Kind of thing. So I'll be touching on the full spectrum of woo-woo. But I support everything with evidence where it's available.
Good stuff. It's always nice to have both sides of the same coin, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking of woo, I just had a little example pop up because my dad is a builder, a very working class, and
so was my dad.
Is he?
He passed away just over a year ago. He had a brain tumour, but my dad worked on building sites all his life.
So they're not really that into woo, are they?
Not so much.
Not really. Quite the antithesis. And one time, Dad was unable to sleep. He's got blood pressure and various other things, and I just started doing some Reiki on him, and then he fell asleep. And then the next day, he goes, "Can you do that thing on me again where your hands got hot?" And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "What is it?" And I went, "I'm not even going to tell you, Dad. I'm not going to bother because it's like, did it make you feel better?" He goes, "Yeah, felt really nice." It's like, cool. Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah, great. Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant.
So sometimes not talking about it and just doing it or whatever it is can work, especially if their minds.
Because then you bypass the mind. Sometimes things can sound too unbelievable. I'm going to do a Reiki healing on you. And as soon as people hear that word, sometimes it's like,
I'm just going to channel the universe for you, Dad. Don't worry about it, mate.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll be fine. I'm going to channel the universe, Dad. And then that person's negative expectations block the effect.
Exactly.
So sometimes, like you did, you just don't say, I'm just going to do this thing, and don't even tell them what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I felt like a bit of a fibber, but it was good. It was good for him. So what other sort of techniques or practices are you looking forward to sharing at Mind Body Spirit?
Right, well, I will be sharing kindfulness. I'll be talking about a kindfulness practice, a couple of kindfulness practices. But I'm also going to show how to kind of power up, if you will, or distant, like when you say a prayer for someone or you have a distant healing intention. You know someone's not doing so well and you want to send positive vibes to them, kind of thing. First of all, is that possible? Well, a lot of evidence says that yes, it is. And secondly, is it possible to power that up? And so I'll be teaching a wee way. So I'll be showing people how to send distant healing intention, but also how to power it up. What's the key component that we need to use to actually intensify the effect of what we're doing.
Great.
Yeah.
Nice take home things. It's like having a little party bag coming to hang out with you, isn't it? Little party bag of mind, body, spirit techniques.
Exactly.
Can you share some anecdotes from your own life that show how beneficial the mind body practices can be? And can you share any success stories from previous workshops?
Well, I've got one in tennis. So I took up tennis when we moved to Dunblane in central Scotland. It's very famous for Andy Murray, Jamie Murray, the former world #1 tennis players. And, I'd never played tennis until I was 45 years old. And so quite a few years ago, about 8 years ago, we moved to Dunblane, took up tennis. And I was, for about 2 years in the club leagues, I was the second worst tennis player in Dunblane. I think my average losing margin in the league system was 6-love, 6-1. I was second bottom of the bottom division, and I never won a set of tennis in 2 years because most people in Dunblane have been playing and being coached since childhood, and so I had a steep learning curve. So I decided I've done a lot of coaching. I used to be an athletics coach several years ago.
Wow.
And so I decided to put into practice some of the things I taught other people. So I set myself a wee plan of 4 weeks. It was 4 weeks to the next league, league block. And I created a wee table: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And I visualized every day doing an enhanced tennis serve, right? Because I figured that the serve, if you can get that right, because the tennis serve, believe it or not, is the second most complex move in all of sport, second only to the pole vault. It's very technically complex. Pros make it look easy, but there's a very complex way of holding the racket and moving it in different ways. That's why it's ranked number 2 behind the pole vault. And so I visualized every single day, and I used a little technique that can speed the process up where you watch a professional doing it, and I created a wee loop on an editing program I've got, and I watched it like 3,000 times just to really. It's called action observation. It's a little trick of neuroscience to speed up the learning of physical things. But I visualised every day. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I won the league.
What?
Yeah, I went from second bottom to winning the division in 4 weeks. My serve had literally transformed in 4 weeks. I mean, I was still just off the bottom division. I was not the second, but now, 6 years after that we have about 9 divisions, and I hover between the top division and the second division because I use visualization for each particular shot. Because when you play better players, they'll attack a particular shot. So I realise what they do. So I'll visualise hundreds of repetitions, just like you might say hundreds of affirmations. I'll do hundreds of repetitions of how to deal with that particular shot to literally wire it into the brain and body.
That is so cool. That's like a full-blown magic trick in real life, isn't it?
It's just, it's the effort. Sometimes we don't realise that with movement and sport and even any physical thing, sometimes you need to do as much of the mental stuff as you do the physical stuff. I think that's one of the misconceptions of the mind-body connection, like we talked about at the start. You don't just think it once and that's you. If you wanted to run 10K, then you don't just jog once round the block and then you go and run a 10K. You train for months.
Yeah.
So I think one of the misconceptions to come full circle is we think that you just one thought and should all it takes, and we forget that sometimes with the mind, you have to repeat the thing, you have to do it repeatedly. But therein lies something amazing, like magic, because if you do it repeatedly, then amazing things can actually happen. In fact, here's an example to answer the second part of your question. I get a woman that I met at MBS. Actually, a few years ago, she'd been on one of my talks, and she even contributed to one of my books because I asked her to tell a story in my book, How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body. She had lupus. And, lupus is an autoimmune condition. It's where the immune system, the word auto means the immune system is attacking the body. kind of thing. And with lupus, it's the kidneys, it's the skin, and she knew, she's very interested in mythology, and she knows that lupus was the Latin for wolf. So in her imagination, I always teach a strategy. You've got to create a way of mentally representing illness and turn that into a way of mentally representing wellness. So you're turning illness into wellness in your imagination. You're just doing it mentally.
Yeah.
So her mental representation of lupus was ferocious wolves in her body, because lupus means wolf. So her mental representation, her way of representing mentally lupus, was ferocious wolves that were snapping and all that. So in her imagination, over several weeks and months, she tamed the wolves. She stroked their mane. She told them how much she loved them. She sometimes sitting watching the TV with her husband at night, husband Matt. She would lie there and imagine she was stroking the mane of the wolf and taming it. And after weeks and months of this, she went completely into remission. She came off all lupus drugs, went completely into remission by just taming the wolf. And it was a repetition. She didn't just do it once and say, right, oh, lupus, wolf, right, I'll just see the wolf calming down and that's me, I shouldn't be doing it anymore. She did it every day, a few times a day, for weeks, what eventually became months. But therein lies the wee miracle. If you do the work, it's not just the one thought. If you're willing to do the work, then amazing things can sometimes happen. And for her, it was life-changing.
Incredible.
Life-changing thing. Yeah.
Wow, that's really quite something. Yeah, the story you tell yourself, and then you have to undo that story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do the practice with it.
And sometimes it can take a little while.
Yeah.
But does that matter all that much if your expectation is this could be a really powerful thing for me?
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
And who should come to your workshop? Your workshop at Mind Body Spirit Festival is on the 24th of May at 12:30 in the afternoon, not at night, obviously. And it's called The Power of the Mind. So who should come to this?
Really, anyone with an interest in the mind-body connection, anyone who's interested in learning what are the ways that you can tap into the mind-body connection? What are some of the practical things that you can do? And also people interested in learning about some of the new research. What is the scientific validation? What is the backup? What is the evidence that supports the fact that the mind can impact on the body, and we even can have a positive impact some of the time on other people as well. So people interested in how to do it, and sometimes a lot of people are just interested in the subject. Just think, because a lot of therapists come along as well. People, practitioners, find it interesting because it's useful background information they can always share with clients to give the clients a wee bit more hope.
Yeah. It's just another string to people's bow, isn't it? For well-being, it's another angle. It's
absolutely.
It's definitely miraculous, and because the mind is a more subtle part of our being, when you do get results from it, it literally does feel like a miracle, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
So grand. And if people have been to your talks before, how will this be different? Will they get something different from this one?
Yeah, well, most of when I do talks, it's just like a quick 45 minutes or a 1 hour talk, so there's no room for the practices. So the main difference with this is there will be a couple of practices that we'll be doing, a couple of practical bits. So the main thing is some extra new bits of science, new evidence that's come to light, richer understanding of things, because I've got a bit more time to teach than just in a talk. But as I say, some of the practical stuff as well is quite handy to have.
That's great. It's always good when people can get their teeth stuck in.
Yeah.
Because then they can ask you questions as well, can't they? Once they give it a go and see how it goes for them. Brilliant. Well, I'll see you there. Thank you very much for spending some time having a chat with me. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat.
Great. And people can find tickets to you at mindbodyspiritfestival.co.uk/London. I look forward to seeing you there, David. Thank you so much, mate.
See you there, Rach. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks
Cheers.
a lot.
Thank you for listening to the Mind Body Spirit Festival podcast. We would love to connect with you in real person at one of our epic events. Go to mindbodyspiritfestival.co.uk for tickets and information. I will see you there. Don't forget, you can also follow us on Instagram, MBS Wellbeing, for behind the scenes content, updates and offers.
Stay cosmic, you beautiful soul.